Good. Let's begin. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Reverend Fathers, Reverend Sisters, Miss Magdalene, good afternoon and welcome to the 10th conference of our retreat, the last conference and the final conference of the entire retreat. Good. Before we get into the session proper, I would like to discuss on Mary, which Father Hridaya had asked in the morning. So we'll quickly discuss that point, then we will get into the session proper. 6 points I discovered. Number 1, for Augustine, Mary is mother of Christ, and she is the believer first. We know that famous quotation where Augustine said, Mary conceived first in her heart, then in her body. So that's she becomes the first disciple before she becomes the mother. That's the first understanding according to Augustine. Second one, for Augustine, Mary is a model disciple who followed Jesus from Cana to Calvary. From Cana to Calvary. For Augustine, the second understanding is Mary is the model disciple who followed Jesus from Cana to Calvary. Then the third one, Mary's virginity. Augustine is a proponent of it, and Augustine defends it. Mary was virgin before the birth of Jesus, during the birth, and after the birth. This is the famous his contribution to Mariological doctrine of virginity. Then Mary's image, Mary as the image of the church. That is number 4. Mary is the image of the church, like we saw yesterday. The different images Augustine proposes, and Mary is one of those images. And here, Mary becomes a message in terms of faith. Mary is a model believer, we could say. So that's how Augustine connects to ecclesiology, Mary and church. Then fifth point, Mary is humble. Like earlier we said, Jesus is the example of humility, but he also considers Mary, especially her lowly yes, when she said yes, I'm the lowly servant. There he makes a reference to her humility. And the last one, very important, Mariology is often and always Christology. For Augustine, Mary can never be separated from Christ. So we can never have the tendency which developed in the medieval ages, where Mary was given more importance even to the extent of negating Christ. That led to, in fact, the Reformation. Mary was given too much emphasis in the medieval times. But Augustine was very clear. Mary is always related to Christ. Without Christ, you cannot talk about Mary. So these are the 6 quick points, Father Hridaya. Good.
Thank you.
Very good. I repeat once again. Number 1, Mary is mother of Christ. She is the believer. The famous quotation, Mary conceived Jesus in her heart before she conceived him in her body. Number 1. Number 2, Mary is model disciple. Number 3, Augustine defends Mary's virginity. Number 4, Mary is an image of the church. Number 5, Mary is humble. The last one, number 6, Mary and Christ, they are not to be separated. Very good. Good. I share my screen with you. We are on day 5, the heart that rests and serves. Augustine, the contemplative servant. In fact, we have begun the understanding of contemplation as referring to beauty. How do we recognize beauty in everything and in everybody? That leads to contemplation. For our talk, I have taken from confession to praise, life, ministry, and vocation as an offering to God. So the key word that we are going to discuss is rest, because the entire list of conferences, we have been moving from restlessness to rest. That's the movement. So in that way, the moment of rest becomes the moment of praise. Praise not only in our words, but also in our action through our ministry. So that's how I have the word praise instead of rest. But the key word that we will be discussing, or the key word takeaway, would be the word rest. Good. So building on the argument, building from Augustine, Augustine's Confessions, the first quotation: our rest is in our place, love lifts us there. So earlier we had discussed about this, that we love is like a, we are where we want to be, it will take us. That's a desire, love, that's concept of weight. So here Augustine says our rest is in our place. So by our place he means already the place of God. And the place of God, this particular word place, has a reference in the later books of the Confessions where it means to say house of God. Augustine is fond of this expression, house of God. And from here only he later develops into city of God. City of God, the concept he takes from the place. So place becomes house of God later in Confessions. Then that is developed into city of God. So here, rest is to be in the house of God, and our love for God will take us there. Good. That's number one. Number two, towards the end, when he makes the final prayer, he says, "You shall rest in us as now you work in us." Very beautiful. He contrasts because he is about to complete the creation narrative, the first creation narrative from the book of Genesis, chapter 1. So God is working for 6 days, and God is resting on the seventh day. But what happens? We are now still living, which means we are part of these 6 days. You remember the life cycle which we had discussed. Augustine, Augustine presents human life stages in 6 stages. So God is always working with us, but he is at rest in us. That you shall rest in us as now you work in us, which means he is playing with the word in the sense we are still alive, but still in that life, God can rest and God can give us rest. That's the word play he is doing with rest and work. And the third one, the seventh day has no evening and no sunset. That's again a very, very beautiful observation from Augustine, because all the 6 days, the creation, it was evening, it was morning, the first day. It goes till the sixth day. It was evening, it was morning, the sixth day. But when it comes to the seventh day, it has no evening. Means it's eternal. So Augustine, in a way, he takes this concept and refers to the eternal rest we all will embrace one day. So whoever has come into the world one day has to leave the world and embrace this eternal rest. And it's not to threaten anyone, any reader, but this is the reality he wants everyone to accept, because every one of us has to face the seventh day of our own life, and that seventh day will have no evening, because we will become eternal in God. That's again referring to God. Time, we can say, in these 6 days, we are part of time. There is evening, there is morning. But on the seventh day, we become eternal like God, because we become one with God. And Augustine always, like the book of Ecclesiastes, wants us to remember that eternal rest we all. So again, from the point of view of Stoicism or different management writers, they say begin with the end in mind. So when they talk about that begin with the end in mind, not only the end of the matter, which is the concern, but the end of everything. So when we begin everything with that end in mind, we'll be more humble in our relationship. We'll be very sincere, and we will not quarrel with anyone. We will not postpone any decision, because the end is always near and the end is always in the heart. So here, the seventh day is the ultimate rest we all want to have in God. Then building on that, from the same book again, we shall rest and we shall see. We shall see and we shall love. We shall love and we shall praise. So this is again a kind of prayer, but a self-exhortation he makes. We shall rest and we shall see. So here we shall see God here and now, and we shall love God and we shall praise. So here he takes only one sense. And in the previous talk, we had discussed about the five senses, but here Augustine just focuses on seeing, because seeing is the key sense for him. Because anything that you see, for example, see, there is a sound nearby. I'm saying to you, see, there is a sound nearby. See, the plate is very hot. So the plate is very hot. It cannot be seen, only it can be felt. But what we often see, the plate is very hot. See, that sound is coming from there. See this. So seeing is the key thing because seeing involves other elements also. When Augustine talks about the senses, he says seeing is the prime sense, and or we can say seeing is the leader of all senses. So when God rests in us, we shall also enter into rest. And in that rest, the all the sensual organs, they are not passive, they are still active, but they lead us to love, and that love leads us to praise. Then finally, let me know you, you, know me. Let me know you as I am known. Means I am known by God. So that intimacy Augustine tries to aim at. Let me know you as I am known by you. I think that's the ultimate absolute ideal that we can think of, that knowing God as he knows us. Maybe that would happen only in the life after, because we can go near God but we can never comprehend God. That's the desire Augustine expresses here. So these are some expressions and verses where we get to understand how Augustine understands rest and how he invites us to have that rest. Now let's take a biblical background. First one from Psalm 103. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and do not forget all his benefits. So, a heart who is at rest becomes a grateful heart. So, we could say an attitude of gratitude. They say attitude, that is the attitude of gratitude, raises the altitude of the multitude. This is how they play with the word. Altitude is the one's own tallness, one's own height, that is raised by what? By our attitude of gratitude. So when we become grateful to whatever God has done to us, we become persons of rest. Because a grateful heart is always at rest. Only a murmuring heart, a complaining heart is restless. So from that point of view, today as we conclude the conference, as we can ask for a heart that is grateful, grateful for all the benefits. Second one, patience and perseverance. Very beautifully, we have Paul writing to the Philippians, where he says, very beautifully, he says, the one who began a good work among you will bring to completion. I think when we were ordained, the bishop says to us, the one who began a good work, like as soon as we promise obedience at our diaconate and our priestly ordination, immediately the ordaining bishop says to us, the one who began a good work will bring it to completion, because this has to be brought to completion. That vow of obedience has to be brought to completion. Our readiness has to be brought to completion. And that involves patience and perseverance. So coming to rest is not a one day experience or one day event. It needs a lot of patience and a lot of perseverance, especially you may come out of one habit, but in order to remain in that habit, you need perseverance. So today, it's easy to be a good person, but to be good every day is very difficult, because I can be good now, I can be sincere now. But will I be sincere tomorrow, day after, or in given a different circumstance? There comes the problem. So perseverance is the problem. Action is not a problem. We can just immediately act. We can leave a habit, or we can become a good person, or we can become a kind person. But that leads that will it be repeated? That's the question. Will it be completed? That's how Paul understands. The one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion. Then the third one, be honorable. We have this treasure in clay jars. Beautifully, Paul writes to the Corinthians that when he talks about the inner being, that gives us meaning, and the outer being is disappearing because we are aging day by day. Now, how do we understand this concept of clay? To understand that, I would take another example. That's from Second Timothy. We'll be reading shortly these days because we have been reading in the first lectionary, the Second Timothy. So very beautiful. Paul, but many people say it was not written by Paul, maybe a Pauline author. But we shall take as the church teaches us. It's written by Paul. Okay. Paul now is writing to a baby bishop, two baby bishops of his time, Timothy and Titus. So Timothy is a baby bishop of Ephesus. They say when Timothy was made a bishop, he might have been between 18 to 23 or 18 to 21. So he's very young. So now he's giving instructions to Timothy and later to Titus. So after giving a lot of instructions in two books, so he's about to complete the entire letter. And now he uses a metaphor like Jesus. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, he gives a very long discourse. And at the end, he uses a metaphor of a house built on a rock and house built on the sand. So this is how great teachers conclude their discourses. So Paul, like a rabbinic teacher, concludes his own argument using this metaphor. He says, in a large house, there are vessels not only of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay, some for honorable use, some for ordinary. All who cleanse themselves of the things that I have mentioned, which means he mentioned earlier that about sexual immorality, impatience, and other conflict and other things, will become special, honorable utensils or vessels, dedicated and useful to the master of the house, ready for every good work. So now we shall understand when we talk about these vessels, we think that these vessels are just like vessels in our own time. So we need to go to Paul's time. So Paul's time, he imagines a house of a landlord. There are four types of vessels. A very big house will have gold vessels. They are meant for worship, worship of God. So they are meant for worship, and they will be handled by the master. Even now, all the church utensils, the vessels we see, the chalice, ciborium, monstrance, we all have in gold because gold is very rare. What is rare belongs to God. So gold is always related to worship. So golden vessels were reserved for worship and they were touched by the master. Then silver vessels were there in the house. They were meant for dining. So when you serve food or when you are taking food from the plates were the spoon and fork, they were in silver. Silver was made to be used at the table for dining. Again, it was touched by whom? By the master or the family members. So gold vessels for worship, silver vessels for dining. Third one is the wooden vessels. Wooden vessels were serving as a wash basin. Today we have in our own houses wash basin, maybe for vomiting or in that context, vomitorium was there, or even splitting the saliva or mouthwash. For everything, they had used wooden utensils or wooden vessels. They were handled by the slaves. And the last one, clay vessels, they were used to collect human excretion because that those days they didn't have toilets attached to their houses. So what they would do, they would excrete in the clay vessels. And again, the slaves will handle the clay vessels. They will take out and throw somewhere, and they will clean and keep it back to the master's house. So now four vessels are there: gold and silver handled by the master, wood and clay handled by the slave. So now Paul asks Timothy to make a choice. All four are useful. All four are useful. All four are needed for a house, for the well-being of the house, for the well-being of a person who is living in that house. But still, some are honorable, some are dishonorable or ordinary. So the first two are honorable, the second two are ordinary. So maybe Timothy might have thought, okay, what is the use if I am like anybody else, ordinary? So Paul makes him elevate to the state of a bishop, elevate to the state of being rare, being honorable. And he says, you have to become honorable. How? You cleanse yourself, you set apart yourself from all these things. Then once you set apart, what happened? Three things happen. One, you become honorable. So today, when we set everything apart, when we set all the restlessness apart, what happens? We become honorable. Honorable not in the eyes of others. Oftentimes we think about honor in the eyes of others, like the titles that they have or the positions and the offices we hold, all give honor in the eyes of other people. So we may have 101 honors from outside, but within us, if we feel dishonorable, everything else collapses. If you come to the darkness of your room, there you feel, oh, outside people praise you so much, but you are nothing less than this particular habit. Immediately, our mind will say to us, you are not at all honorable. So it is very important that we become honorable in our own eyes and in the eyes of God. That is number one. Number two, you become useful to the master. So the vessels are there not for vessel's sake, but vessels are for utility. For example, when there is a chair, the chair has to be used, otherwise just it occupies a place. In the same way, unless the vessels are used, they just occupy the place. So Paul is saying, you become useful to the master. So the implication is, oftentimes we try to be useful to our own selves, are useful to our family members or friends, but not useful to the master. So the second invitation is, are we useful to the master? And the third one, ready for every good work. So in the pastoral epistles, that is First Timothy, Second Timothy, and Titus, good, that is godliness and good work, they always go together. So if you are a godliness person, you have to show that in good works. So when we are rooted in God, resting in God, it has to reflect in the good works that we are doing. Now, going back to the previous slide, where when Paul says treasure in clay, now you understand the meaning of clay. So the treasure is kept in the place where human urine or human excretion is collected. So you imagine that how scandalous that image looks like. But when we just read treasure in clay jars, we think of a clay pot in our own house. But think of clay in Paul's time. The clay jars were used by the slaves, and they were used for mainly for human waste, collection of human waste. So in that, God has placed the treasure. So how Paul humbles himself to the extent of becoming a clay jar, but still he says our value comes because of the treasure that is within us. So we also need to remember today at the end of our retreat, all the honor that we have is because of the treasure that is within, not because of the clay. So outside, anyone will just look at the clay and they will say this is to be handled by a slave. And clay also refers to the vulnerable nature of our own life, not like a metal. We are not in a metal jar, but the treasure is not, if it is to be a metal jar, it will be safe. But God chooses the vulnerable nature of every one of us, not necessarily priests and religious. So every human person is vulnerable, and in that vulnerability, God chooses to dwell. So which means the treasure of rest is possible for everyone. So I used the other text to make you understand the meaning of clay. So you could take this as an independent lesson, or you could also connect to the previous one, the understanding of clay. Good. Now, what is our context? Augustine, as we said, he moves from confession one stage to another, because first he confesses his sin, then he confesses his faith, then finally praise. So in that uh, direction, we can say he moves from confession to praise. So the Confessions, the book, is not simply Augustine's autobiography. It is a prayer, theology, memory, repentance, praise, mission, and even we can add faith. Faith not only of Monica, but his own faith. Then the second one, this particular concept of rest invites us to praise. We need to see our own lives as a confession before God, confessing sin with humility, confessing faith with trust, confessing praise with gratitude. Retreat is not a private consolation, but a renewed mission. So the word retreat is a military term. For example, when you say this particular armed force retreated, what is the meaning of retreated? They just didn't withdraw. Withdrawing is withdrawing from the war. Retreat means you take a moment back, prepare yourself, and bounce back all the more with more force. That's called retreat. So if you withdraw, a force is withdrawn means that's withdrawn for maybe lack of means, or maybe for because of peace. But if an armed force is in retreat, what is the meaning? It is coming to renew itself with more resources in order to be more forceful. So retreat primarily means, it's a military term. So for us, it means it's not a private consolation. Like 5 days we took off from our ministry, we took some time to reflect, and now that's done. No, it makes us go ahead to face the world and with a renewed mission. So that way, this particular retreat talk, that's the last talk, becomes the point of arrival and the point of departure, because we have arrived, and in that point of arriving, we depart for mission. So that restlessness to rest is not a point of arrival. Rest is a point of arrival in terms of going to God, but from there we can again depart. So rest becomes the point of arrival and the point of departure. Good. Now, how do we understand Augustine's rest? Augustine does not stop with these initial stages of carnal pleasures. He later adds some more factors that can make our hearts restless. So they have implication for us also. Number one, sexual desire and memory of desire. So Augustine, he talks about here wet dreams, in the sense, okay, I have left my sexual habits and carnal pleasures. I said no. But what happens when I am asleep? He again thinks. So when I am asleep, my body or my mind plays back those moments and it has its own release. So now Augustine says these are the areas that we can't have control unless our memory is purified. But he doesn't propose. But he only suggests that that leaving of a particular habit will not make you at rest immediately. There will be still some more dangers. So that's the memory. So sexual desire, from the point of view of body, you can stop, but still memory has a role. That let's just be aware of it. Number two, food and drink. He talks about his own food and drink, and he says very beautifully. He says hunger is like a disease, a short disease. For example, it's about 1 o'clock here, and I feel hungry. Which means it's like a disease. It's a lack. So Augustine, what he says, if there is a lack, if there is a disease, you give a medicine. Okay. What is the medicine? Food is the medicine. Okay. You have given now, the hunger is satisfied. Augustine says, as soon as you are given the medicine, you stop. Because medicine is only we can give little. But what you are doing, you are adding to that to satisfy your desire. So what was considered to be for treatment becomes a fulfillment of desire. So suppose I have fever and I take paracetamol for 3 days and my fever is now gone, I can stop paracetamol. Suppose I have a desire for paracetamol, if I take more, what happens? I hurt myself. So same metaphor is using food and drink are only meant to satisfy the hunger or the thirst, which is a small disease. So you kill that disease for a moment and that's enough. But what happened, he says, there is excess or something we have attached. For example, tomorrow is Friday, day after tomorrow is Sunday. Sunday, I will have this food. If I think about Sunday's food on Friday, what is the meaning? He says, you are attached to that food. So once you have the desire, it becomes an attachment. And later, what we do? We compensate. Compensate in the sense, okay, I have done so much of work today, or I have done this one. So I will do something extra, which means I will take little alcohol, or I will take this food, that to compensate my own ministry. So Augustine says this food and drink, they are very tricky. They need to be treated like medicine. And what happens? He says, never give room for excess attachment and compensation. At times this happens. For example, you are at work, maybe for a long time, you are meeting people. Suppose you are in a college or in a school, you have to meet your parents or the teachers. Okay, now you are tired. Maybe after 3 classes, you are tired and you go back and just you are lying down and you take your phone and you start the doom scrolling, either Instagram or what you are. Then you say, okay, it's only compensating. Like I was working for the entire day, maybe I compensate for a moment. But Augustine says, you are compensating now, but when you go back to work, whatever you gathered in your mind will come there. So if you had stopped that compensation, your next work will be peaceful. Because by nature, as we said earlier, the memory goes on collecting images and we can never unmemorize. So let's keep it in mind. Whatever memorize it has, you can never unmemorize. Only the time erases those memory. So suppose I doom scroll for about 60 minutes, average 45 videos I take in. 45 videos, 45 concepts, and they don't have any coherence and they don't follow any order. Randomly, the algorithm pushes to me, and randomly, my mind also gets disturbed. Okay, this information came, one Bible verse came, then one actress came, then one political news came, then one management lesson came. So, how the mind will get adjusted to all this information? So, compensation also creates a problem. And the third one, pleasant sounds and music. He talks about church music here. So he says, oftentimes we sing songs in the church and we are happy to sing them. But what happens? We hold on to the music, forgetting that the music leads to the creator. We hold on to the musician, forgetting that we have to elevate our minds and hearts to God. So it happens many of our celebrations, especially we bishops, priests, and religious will know, in all the celebrations that you think of, either first profession, final profession, ordination, any big celebration, we give so much of importance to choir and singing. But those words, do they really affect us? They hardly affect us. That's why the church is very clever in the sense it tells, even the responsorial psalm, it suggests that we read from the psalm that is suggested. But what we do, we replace with a hymn, and that hymn distracts us, and the choir takes a performance. And in the end, we remember the choir, we not remember the words, and we don't remember even God to whom those words were praised. So he says excess pleasant music, even church music, can be can create restlessness. Then sights and curiosity. Sights refers to our sight, our seeing. So as Ecclesiastes says, our eyes are not satisfied with the seeing, and our ears are not satisfied with the information. So here Augustine says, whatever you see, you will continue to see, and the more you see, the eyes will crave for more. Curiosity refers to hearing. So you hear one information, hear about one rumor, that rumor, and it goes on, and your curiosity gets added. So these sights and curiosity, they also create a restlessness. Then desire to be loved and feared. So this is very important when we are in the leadership position. Suppose when we are at the leadership role as a provincial superior or superior general, we feel that people should fear about our presence. We think fear means discipline. So if you keep the people in fear, people are disciplined. No, that's not a good understanding, because once you disappear from that place, people will in fact talk about you. That's why Machiavelli beautifully says, if people are afraid to talk to you, they will talk about you. If people are afraid to talk to you, they will talk about you. Suppose I'm a provincial superior and I feel okay, great that people are afraid to come to me. But what happens? They are afraid to talk to me. So what will happen? They will talk about me. So when you don't give room for talking to you, you are giving room for talking about you. So never ever let us get into this wrong understanding of, when we keep people in fear, people will be good, or we are keeping a discipline. No. So Augustine says he had this temptation, desire to be loved and feared, but he says ultimately you are to be loved, you are to be feared. So God is to be feared, not a leader, not a leader of a community, or not a leader of a house, or not a leader of a community. So all these things are not to be feared. Only God needs to be feared, because this particular to be loved and feared, this gives instinct, this gives a pleasure to our ego. Okay, I go there, and people, as soon as I go there, people stop talking and they are very silent. I feel very, very great. My presence makes an impact. No, your presence is not making an impact. You are creating a fear that will again lead to rumor, or lead to gossip. So Augustine warns about this temptation also. The love of praise and human approval. Every moment we see human person, how they would approve of our own behavior. That begins from our childhood. Like everything that we want to be approved, but that could cause restlessness. Then vainglory and self-satisfaction. Vainglory. We can give one example from Gurcharan Das. He is a famous writer, Indian writer. He has written very good books, especially the so-called the arthas, that is the three arth, that is wealth, pleasure, and dharma. These three are the three meaning making processes in Hinduism. He has this writing there. So once he writes on the blog this way. So he goes for a medical checkup. Means he goes to the lab to give his blood. And the receptionist girl asks his name. What's your name? Usually they take the name and age. So that girl asks the name, and this person Gurucharan writes. So she asked my name to be written in the slip. What I did, instead of saying my name, I asked for the Hindu newspaper which was there. I opened the editorial page and I showed her that this is my name. And she just smiled and wrote my name. And Gurcharan Das continues beautifully. I will never meet that girl again in my life. I may not meet her at all. But what made me say that I am important, because my name appears in the newspaper? That's vainglory. Oftentimes, okay, my name comes there, I am quoted there. So that type of vainglory, and Guru Sharan very beautifully develops in these small matters, we seek vainglory and we feel great, okay, my name is there. But for that girl, that whether your name appeared there or not does not matter. For her, what matters is what's your name, I need to enter into the sleep. So oftentimes, instead of giving direct things, we are giving all these things, puffed up things, because we want to have vain glory. And it's an example I wanted to cite from Guru Charan Das. So Augustine says all these things still they can cause restlessness. So it's not the sexual desires alone or ambitions alone, pride alone, they cause restlessness, but there are still other factors they can cause our own restlessness. So today we can also think about whether I suffer from any of these. Then he continues the simple ones. God is the beginning and the end. Augustine begins his confession saying, "Great are you, Lord, and greatly to be praised." And more or less, he ends the confessions with the same words. Then he says, from restlessness to rest. How does Augustine qualify rest? For Augustine, rest does not mean laziness. Rest does not mean escaping from the work or the absence of work, nor retirement from mission. For him, rest is the state of the heart that has found its true center in God. So when your heart is centered in God, your heart naturally becomes to be at rest. Then rest is communion. So not necessarily in a hypothetical way we are placing in God, but you are living in a community and you are at home with everyone and your heart is at rest. Rest is trust, which means whatever comes in the future, I will face. That is the trust. Rest is worship, how you place yourself before God. Rest is the peace that comes when our lives are rightly ordered. Rest is the peace. He equates rest with peace. Our will is surrendered. Our life is placed in God's hands. This is how Augustine understands rest. So when he talks about rest, he has no reference to our own resting at night, but his rest is above all these things. Primarily, rest is peace, rest is ordered love, or rest is truth. This is how we can understand Augustine's rest. Then, how do we move from rest to renewed ministry? The retreat that does not return us to love is incomplete. So, we need to now return to our own people to love them. Augustine's rest in God becomes service to the church, because once Augustine gets converted, his heart is at rest. But now he begins to be a priest, begins to be a bishop of Hippo. Then there he begins the service. So think of now today, maybe till the adoration you have time, think of a few simple, realistic resolutions. Maybe one habit you would say no. You would say no completely, because you remember total no is better than careful yes. So totally, are you able to say no to something? Or we may think maybe initially may not be may not be easy, but little by little we can get rid of that. Anything, any one or two resolutions you could think of. Maybe more time in prayer, maybe a smile in the community, or something like that. Like you think of a few simple, realistic resolutions. Maybe one or two you can think about, and you can think about them and in your prayer when you come for adoration. You need not share with others, only you keep for yourself. Then final synthesis of our retreat. So how we have moved in these 5 days. We began with the restless hearts. That is the general theme we took. So we discussed what is the meaning of restlessness and what is the meaning of heart. With heart, we said with the different biblical references, heart is the center of the human person. Then we ran through these 10 words in the 10 conferences. We began with restlessness, search that leads to memory, interiority, conversion, humility, love, church, beauty, and finally, today we have concluded with the rest. So these are the 10 words we have run through in our conferences. So now you put everything together, it forms a, I tried yesterday, it to keep conversion at the center, and more or less it works this way. And to begin this particular slide, I would like to quote Ecclesiastes 7:8. He says, "Better is the end of a thing than its beginning." So Augustine's beginning is not important, because that's like any one of us. But Augustine's end is very important, because he became very great. So always think of this end. Think of the finish line. So it's not enough that we begin. We begin so many things, but do we end? So better is the end of a thing than its beginning. And conversion is the center. Now look at the words arranged here. First, we began with the restlessness that led us to search. Then search enters memory because whatever we search, it gets into memory as images. Then memory leads to interiority because memory resides in the mind. Interiority opens conversion because conversion is an internal experience. Because Augustine says, I became a problem to myself, which means I have to handle that in my interiority. Conversion grows in humility because for Augustine, conversion means humus, experience of that humus, understanding that I am nothing but then the mud. So removing all the labels, that is conversion. Again, humility purifies love. Love serves the church reveals beauty, that is God, and beauty leads the heart to rest in God. Beauty in terms of contemplation. So when you think of this graph, you can think of conversion at the center. You can think of also one more. I have tried with this, not exactly I thought it has come, but still more or less it's a spiral, Augustine spiral, because the image of spiral, we have been talking the other day, Bishop Raja have also mentioned about that, the spiral. So how we understand, just look at the numbers, if you follow the lines, you may get lost. Number one, restlessness becomes search. So we become restless, then we are searching. Search enters the memory. Memory leads to interiority. Then number four, interiority opens conversion. Conversion grows in humility. Humility purifies love. Then love serves the church. The church reveals the beauty and it takes you to the inner being of the heart. That is, beauty leads the heart to rest in God. More or less like the interior castle of Teresa of Avila. It leads to chamber after chamber. Finally, we lead to the mason after mason. Finally, it goes to the final point where you feel that you are a mansion. In the final mansion, you feel that you are within that's the center of your heart, which is without any boundary. That's we can connect with the Teresa of Avila also. So finally, in our these conferences, ultimately we have aimed to reach this particular point, that is 9, to find our beauty being at rest in God. I think this is the point of arrival, and that becomes the point of departure for our mission. And there are the regular personal review questions you can ask. How can my personal renewal become service to the church? Like still, how I can give church? Church means not necessarily the universal church, but the church could be your diocese, your congregation, your community, your school, wherever you are. So your renewal today, how it will make your mission tomorrow better. Then what one concrete fruit of this retreat should I carry into the new pastoral year? So now in India, we have begun our year, the sense academic year. Usually academic year is considered as a pastoral year because many transfers are happening in this time, May, June, and we are taking up new responsibilities. So, or even as a existing parish priest or as existing mission, you can begin new pastoral year, but make one effort to add that concrete fruit to this pastoral year. Third one, what does God still want to make new in my heart, my community, and my ministry? So these are the 3 renewal questions you could think about. Let's conclude with the prayer. Great are you, Lord, and greatly to be praised. I place my life before you. Make all things new in me. Let my heart rest in you. And from that rest, send me again to serve your church with humility, joy, and love. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Your Excellencies, dear Reverend Fathers, Reverend Sisters, and Miss Magdalene, thank you for your attention.